So we're in week 5 of our Stops Determined Steps series. Today we're going to look at this idea that a misstop just might be a misstep. Last week we were looking at this, what we called the stop-step circle. Again, this whole idea that there's kind of stops, but then there's steps, and there's, stop steps. And again, we were looking at this idea that Jesus starts up in top heaven. This whole idea of paradise. Actually, that's the story where we as people started was up in paradise, but then we kind of came down that side and ended up in the wilderness. And so we were looking at last week that Jesus begins his ministry in the wilderness. And he's baptized by John the Baptist, this kind of strange character in the Bible. And then immediately, that's one of Mark, the Gospel of Mark. We've been looking at some of the passages of the Gospel of Mark. He just uses this word over and over again. We're going to see it again today when we get to it. So immediately, the Spirit drives Jesus out into the wilderness for 40 days of fasting, 40 days of kind of being out there on his own, preparing him for what we might call this long, arduous climb up back up into heaven. So this was this stop-step circle. And so there's all kinds of stops and steps there. And so he is stopped as he goes out into the wilderness, but it's preparing him to take a step towards paradise. And as he stops and steps and stops and steps, he's going to end back up in paradise. And there's this idea that he's going to, help us to step our way towards paradise too. So again, we've been talking about this idea in this Gospel of Mark. There's just this stop-step immediately going on. And this morning, what we're going to look at, again, this opening verse in Mark chapter 1, verse 21, it says, and they went to Capernaum. It's talking about Jesus and his disciples. Right before verse 21, he's called the 4 disciples. And immediately, again, he just uses this word over and over, and immediately on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching. So there's this, this stop. They're going to stop and worship on the Sabbath. So again, this idea of step immediately, just step immediately, kind of this idea of you're stepping to stop, but then stopping to step. And again, I kind of realize that when I say that sort of thing, it's kind of confusing. Stepping to stop, but with stopping to step, and it's kind of this immediate thing that keeps happening. So over the last number of weeks, we've been talking about this. There's that great philosophical question: which came first, the chicken or the egg? And I've just been saying, I don't know. Let's just eat. Let's have an omelet. Let's have some fried chicken in that. And so that's kind of the whole idea here of stopping and stepping and stepping and stopping. And so this morning I want to talk about this idea of that Sunday stopping. What we're doing now is kind of Sunday stepping. And we're going to come back to this idea that sometimes a misstop could be a misstep. So they're in the synagogue on the Sabbath. So again, kind of remember that as we read these next number of verses. So we read these verses. And they were astonished at his teaching. So again, there's all kinds of other people stopped there. For he taught them as one who had authority, not as the scribes. And here comes that word again. And immediately there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are. You're the Holy One of God." I know who you are. You're the Holy One of God. This wasn't a typical kind of Sunday morning thing that happened there. It was something that was very shocking that day. It kind of stopped everybody as this unclean spirit came up in the synagogue, and he's kind of yelling and making noises, and he's kind of convulsing. And so it's sort of one of these things that just like wait, what's going on here? But then we read in the next couple of verses, Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying out with a loud voice, came out of him. So you might remember this scene a little bit. It's not something that we do every Sunday, but again, it came out of him, and he gets up and walks out. So that was my son-in-law, and many of you have thought that he's possessed before this, and now we just have confirmed it this morning. So again, there's so many times, and I know that I've done this too, that I just kind of read the story, oh, that's a nice story, and you just keep going on. But that's not a normal occurrence in a synagogue on the Sabbath. It's not a normal occurrence in our church. Again, if that would really happen here, I'd have to go change my underwear along with probably most of you. And so it's one of those deals where, there's just like, there's a stop and a step, and there's just this immediacy to it, and we see that just happening over and over again. And we planned this morning here. It wasn't planned back then, but Jesus was ready for it. I mean, there's just something about Jesus that no matter when you want to interrupt him, he's ready for our interruption. And in one sense, you really can't interrupt Jesus, because he's always just willing to stop and step with you, no matter what the interruption might be. So then we read here, following these next a couple of verses here, 27 and 28. And again, this really shouldn't come as any surprise. And they were all amazed so that they questioned among themselves, saying, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." And then at once, again, at this time it's immediate, but it's the same idea. At once, his fame spread everywhere throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. So, what I want us to think about in our remaining time together this morning is this idea, again, of this Sunday stopping is Sunday stepping. So when you come to worship celebration on a Sunday morning, you're not really going to miss something that you could have done somewhere else. Sunday stopping is Sunday stepping. And again, this idea that a misstop could be a misstep. So we know that, this passage that we're reading here in Mark chapter 1, verses 21 to 28. Now, we weren't there on that Sabbath day when this original event occurred, but we're here this Sunday. We're here this Sunday with kind of Sunday stopping with Jesus. That's why we're stopping here. It's not to get a religious check mark that we've been to church today. I guess I hope that's not why you're here today. I hope you're here today because maybe your Sunday stopping there would be some moments with Jesus. So Sunday stopping is stopping with Jesus. And then Sunday stepping is stepping with Jesus. The wonder of just Jesus being present with us in the ways that he can be present, that even though he's not present here, he's present here. One of the wonders, one of the mysteries of our Christian faith. So again, if we miss the Sunday Jesus stop, do we also miss the Sunday Jesus step? Now, I want you to know that you're in a church today that we're just, we're trying to, one of our driving values is that we're going to keep inviting and inspiring people to follow Jesus. Inviting and inspiring people to follow Jesus. So we're going to do that kind of every Sunday as much as we're able to. Every Sunday with Jesus Stop is a Jesus Step. And we've been saying this whole idea that Jesus stops determines Jesus steps. Jesus stops determines Jesus steps. So the idea that I want us to, it's not about the misstops that could lead to missteps. The question I want us to always be thinking about is, are we following Jesus? Are we following Jesus? And again, the whole premise of this series is going to be over and over again, Jesus stops determines Jesus steps. If you're not stopping with Jesus, are you stepping with Jesus? Stops with Jesus determines Jesus steps. So one of the things that if you read the Bible with kind of this idea in mind, you're going to see Jesus, he has a pattern of stopping on the Sabbath. we read it how he stops in Capernaum. We know that he stops in the Sabbath in his hometown of Nazareth. There'll be Sabbaths that he's in Jerusalem. There'll be Sabbaths that he's in Bethany. There'll be Sabbaths in all kinds of other places, and he'll stop. He has this pattern. And it's what we open up with today, verse 21. Immediately on the Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and was teaching. So, and this idea that there was the Sabbath stops for Sabbath steps. There were steps to the synagogue on that Sabbath, and he stopped there, but then he's taken steps of teaching, and so there's this stop, step, immediately kind of thing happening over and over again. Jesus stops determines Jesus steps. I'm big of this idea that it doesn't happen just on Sunday. Again, there's something that God has designed for us to experience on Sundays with a Sunday stop and a Sunday step, a Jesus stop and a Jesus step. But we know those can happen daily. Daily Jesus stops, daily Jesus steps. And so daily Jesus stops determine daily Jesus steps. So again, we're in this season of Lent, so we have an opportunity to have a stop on Wednesday evenings if you would like. And again, we're doing this whole idea of this lift. And it's that idea that, we live in this wilderness. On the bottom of that stop, step circle that we're looking at, we live in this wilderness. We live with kind of forces that come against us. Again, that's what makes all the movies that so many of us love, like a Star Wars or the Lord of the Rings. We know that there are forces that come against us as we're trying to receive a lift. And we can live wonderful, wonderful lives and good lives and love our families and love our children and love our grandchildren and love our husband, our wife, and really, just be nice people in that. But we know that that's not enough lift to get us where God would have us to be. So there's this idea that we can have these daily Jesus stops and daily Jesus steps, realizing that if we don't have that in our lives, we're really not going to be able to lift ourselves, but He is the one that is able to lift us back. And then next Sunday, just to let you know, we're going to have a special guest here, Bob Lins. Many of you are familiar with him, and he's going to be, I know that he'll do a stop step with us kind of idea. You won't, have this this deal, but I've heard what he's going to talk about, and he's going to talk about, stopping in the Bible and stepping with the Bible. And as many of you know, he's been doing that for 30 years and all around our country, in so many places and around the world at times. He's just in Haiti. You can see that on their Life Promotions website. So he'll be here next week. He's going to stop by. He's going to, out of his busy schedule, he's going to stop and take some steps with us and serve us here at New Hope. So I just love the daily Jesus stops and the daily Jesus steps I get to take. And what I'm hoping is I can encourage you to love some of your daily Jesus stops and daily Jesus steps. And we've over and over again, we're going to keep kind of teaching and trying to invite and inspire you to take those daily Jesus stops and those daily Jesus steps. Again, you don't stop the whole day. We oftentimes talk about this idea, just what would it look like if you would start your day with a 15-minute kind of stop step. Stopping and reading the Bible for maybe like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and then spend 5 minutes or so just kind of thinking about what you read and saying and speaking some prayers or just thinking some prayers. And so you're reading and stepping and reading and stopping, and you're praying and stopping and praying and stepping. And so it just be this kind of idea of these daily Jesus stops, these daily Jesus steps. And I know it's what fuels me. It's what gives me lift as a pastor just over and over and over again. So I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep trying to invite and inspire you to that too. And then the whole idea of just how do we go against kind of our culture and sometimes even our Christian culture here in America? How do we go against that to love our Sunday stops in one of God's houses? just love that we get to go into a house of God and take some Sunday steps, some Sunday Jesus stops and some Sunday Jesus steps. I know it's kind of a counter-cultural kind of thing. But man, oh man, the more I see people doing it, not just here, but in so many other churches that I'm familiar with and try to even follow and see how it is that they're inviting and inspiring their people to do Jesus stops and Jesus steps. So we're going to keep inviting and inspiring souls to follow Jesus. That's what we're about here at New Hope. Keep inviting and keep inspiring. Again, in one sense, it's really not about the misstops and the missteps. It's not about the missed Sundays. It's, are you following Jesus? So for many of you, I know a lot of your stories. Some of you have just, you can't imagine not taking Sunday stops, Sunday steps. I mean, you're just here. I didn't put that faithfulness in you. I didn't put that in you. You're just here. Some of you know that you kind of been, oftentimes, there was a time that you were more gone than you were here on Sundays. But then, we just kind of kept this idea of inviting and inspiring and inviting and inspiring. And then somehow, I don't know, it just kind of took hold. And now you're here more often than before. And I know, there's families and all over the place, and there's great events going on, and sometimes you go to another church to be with a family or to participate in a baptism or an anniversary. I get all that. But just this idea of how do we love and just look to delight in these Sunday Jesus stops, these Sunday Jesus steps that might fuel us to take those daily Jesus stops and those daily Jesus steps. So here at New Hope, I'm not looking to guilt you today. Not looking to say, where were you last Sunday? We're trying to just create a place where we just keep inviting and keep inspiring until somehow your Jesus stops and your Jesus steps just become a part of your life. And there's a part when that starts to take place, you can't even remember why it was for maybe years that there were a lot of misstops and missteps because Jesus has become a part of you. So I want to end the message today telling you a little bit about, many of you have been praying for a situation that happened this last week in our family, and many of you who are guests, won't know, and so I'll try to bring both of those groups along. So this last Monday, our almost 3-year-old grandson, Bryce, ended up starting to scream out in pain and pointing to his belly. And again, he's a very, very verbal 3-year-old. I know I'm prejudiced and biased and all that kind of stuff. But he goes, something's hurting me right here and it's freaking me out. So they went off to the ER and they did a bunch of tests, and he was very verbal. He started to figure out that every time someone came through the ER door, they were there to poke and prod him, and so he started yelling out, don't let them come in. They're going to hurt me. Daddy, don't let them come in. Punch them in the face. And, it's like... So, but then the ER staff did encourage mom and dad with the idea that him being so verbal was very helpful in helping them to diagnose. So he had this tummy deal, and they were talking about possible surgery, and it didn't happen. He had something I won't talk about that helped it process, but then had another flare-up on Wednesday morning and back to the ER, back to our children's hospital here at the Fox Valley, and had another procedure there. And again, none of these procedures are very, very pleasant for a little guy like that. And then late Wednesday night, real early Thursday morning, had another flare-up, and they put him in an ambulance and took him down to the Children's Hospital in Milwaukee. Again, they left here thinking that they were going to do surgery in Milwaukee, but they got down there, did some testing and diagnosis and stuff, and they see it quite often. There's just more of a volume that happens at Children's Hospital in Milwaukee, and said, no, this is something that will hopefully pass, and they did another unpleasant procedure that I was there for, and helped. It's amazing that there's 6, 7, 8 adults trying to hold a 3-year-old in place, and but then. So Thursdays, usually I kind of take steps and go away and just sort of stop and pray and read and prepare a number of messages and that. So I'm taking steps and that. So with that being the case, I was able to go down and just spend the day there. And again, well, he's fine. He got out on Friday. I was there last night, and you would have never known that he was in the hospital, and maybe surgery was in order, because he wasn't stopping a lot last night, especially as he was jumping on me and we were playing and running around, and so again, for all the prayers, all the things that happened on Thursday, that I was able to, I'm in a place in serving, I'm in a place of me being a pastor here, and that you're such an amazing congregation in so many ways, an amazing family, that I know I'm not going to get into trouble for missing a day of work, because I wasn't missing a day of work, I don't think. So I'm just you're looking at a very, very grateful pastor, and for all the prayers that in so many ways have been answered. And again, for some of you who know, Bryce has one more medical condition that didn't have anything to do with this stomach condition. He's got ASD in his heart, a little hole in the heart, and surgery is scheduled for June. Part of this little experience is like, well, okay, God, have you just preparing us for this June experience? Because we're familiar with the Children's Hospital of Milwaukee now. And even him having this little, he had a little IV in, and so, he's just kind of used to a little bit of this medical stuff. So I don't know. I just know that we're going to keep stopping and stepping with our God, who is holding him more than I can ever hold him. I'm going to be able to hold him and play with him for a few more years. But eventually I know, I'm hoping and praying he's going to outlive me. But I believe in a God. I've stopped with this God. I've stepped with this God. I've stopped with this God. I've stepped with this God. And I just know this God can lift him, can lift you, can lift all of us. There's a wonder about who this Jesus is. So we're going to keep inviting and inspiring people to follow this Jesus, no matter what happens. Because again, as we're going to be thinking about on our Wednesday nights, do you need a lift? Yeah, we needed a lift. And we felt a lift this Thursday in so many ways. And on the days when things are just awesome in our lives, do you need a lift? Well, yeah, I'd like just a little bit more. We have a Jesus. And when we stop and step, there's lift. And so if you would, let's lift yourself up out of the chairs. Let's stand. We're going to pray, sing one more lift song, and be on our way. Thanks for stopping and stepping with Jesus today. So Jesus, we are here in your presence, and you are here with us. So Jesus, we pray that as you continue to stop us, as you continue to step with us, that you would help us to know that truly you are a faithful God, a holy God, and a God that is so amazing in so many ways. That you would keep inviting us, that you would keep inspiring us, that you don't matter. It doesn't matter to you how many misstops or sometimes how many missteps. You just want us to follow you. So Jesus, help us to be a people following you. Help us to keep growing as a family that just knows there is a warmth in following you, a hope in following you. And Jesus, the wonder of you, the wonder of you. We pray these things in your name. Amen.